Do they make too many big sets? Remember before you answer, they're not trying to make sure everyone can get every single set that they want.
Hello friends, welcome to Walter Limited. I'm James. A complaint I hear fairly often is that LEGO makes too many large sets and they need to make more of the affordable ones. So, has LEGO really gone away from making affordable sets and do they only make expensive ones? Let's take a look. For as much as adult fans complain that LEGO only makes massive sets these days, over the last 3 years per brick set, the vast majority of sets produced by the LEGO Group have been under $100. So far in 2024, there have been 26 sets over $100 and only 16 over $150. And that includes the Bricklink Designer Program sets. Conversely, there have been over 200 sets so far in the $6 to $99 price range. So that excludes polybags and it excludes collectible minifigures. So we're taking out the bottom end of the filler sets that, people complain about. Oh, that's not really a set. What that means is about 10% of LEGO sets this year so far are over $100. For all of 2023, there were 68 sets released over $100, with 42 over $150. There were also over 460 sets from $6 to $99. So again, excluding polybags, excluding CMFs, there were 460 sets. In 2022, the number over 100 was 59, with 36 over $150. That leaves over 460 from the $6 to $99 mark. Again, the vast majority and only about 10% of the sets reaching that higher threshold. What I find amusing is that as a counterpoint to they make too much expensive stuff, I often hear, well, if they just made it $30 more expensive, they could have included X, Y, and Z. Last year in 2023, I had the opportunity to attend a presentation by a member of LEGO's community engagement team, the people that run the LAN. They came out to a convention that I was at, and Jordan Paxson, who is one of the community engagement leads, gave a presentation about the LAN and what they're looking to do and why they pick people or organizations and why they don't. Afterwards, he had an open question and answer period. The question probably most germane to this topic during that was someone raised their hand and they asked, Jordan, when will LEGO stop making $500+ sets? And he answered, a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but not really, when you stop buying them. So LEGO is going to keep making the big sets as long as we're purchasing them. They are serving the market. Now, the prices of LEGO sets have gone up. There are several reasons behind that. Inflation, it's a thing. Piece counts have gone up, complexity of builds have gone up for the most part. Number of themes, number of minifigures, number of exclusive prints, all of these things are far higher than they were back in the good old days, whenever that was for you. Whether that was the early 2000s or the 90s or the 80s, let's be honest. The quality of LEGO figures, prints, sets, all are way better than they were. Take the nostalgia goggles off. It's better now than it was. Let's take a quick look at that inflation problem. One thing that people often point to of late is the Speed Champions increase to $27 a set. In 2015, that number was $15. In today's dollars, that's about $20. In 2020, the price bumped to $20. This is when they transitioned to the 8-wide Speed Champions. And they went from around 170 to 180 pieces in a Speed Champion build to around 280 to 290 pieces in a Speed Champions build. So you're getting a lot more. And that 2020 price, the $20 from 2020, would equal $24 now. If we took the $27 price tag from today and put that back in 2015 dollars, that would actually be $20. So the real argument is that we were getting a great deal in 2020 at that lower price point. We should have been spending more if the price had stayed consistent. So we got a better deal for several years. Another popular complaint is, well, collectible minifigures were $2. Okay, collectible minifigures were $2 for 2 series. For 1 year, collectible minifigures were $2. And that's $3 in today's money from back in 2010. Immediately in 2011, the second year of collectible minifigures, that price went up to $3 a piece, which is $4 in today's dollars. In 2022, it bumped to $5, which is $6 in today's dollars. Collectible minifigures staying at $5 for the past several years, they've been getting cheaper. And let's be honest, looking at those early years of collectible minifigures and comparing them to today, you know which ones are better. For all the "they used to be so much better" crowd, it's just not true. So I picked out 4 minifigures from the first 4 series: the Deep Sea Diver, the Weightlifter, Space Alien, and Ice Skater, and compared them against their counterparts, close analogs in later series. Marine Biologist from Series 20, Figure Skating Champion from Series 22, the Fitness Instructor from Series 25, and the Beetlezoid from Series 26. If we compare these apples to apples, the justification for $5 today versus $3 or $4 in today's dollars back when they started is clear. Also remember that during this time period, the early time period, it really was a lot harder to get the best figures out of each set. Yes, some of the figures in each series were as good as the ones today, or close. But typically there were 2 of those in a box and there were 5 of the more plain generic figures in each box. LEGO fans complained, and now you get an even distribution. Sure, there are random boxes that don't have a completely even distribution, but pretty much the order of the day now is if you have a case, it has 3 sets in it rather than 2 of this one, 3 of this one, 4 of this one, 5 of this one. It's more fair, and there are more better figs across the series. Another example, battle packs. Star Wars fans love to point, well, battle packs used to be $10. Okay. This is another case of you're remembering it way differently than it actually happened. The first battle pack in 2007 was $10. That's $15 today, adjusted for inflation. That's the 7654 and 7655, the clones and the droids, which were basically remade this last year at $30. And pound for pound, it's the same thing. You got the same value, $30 to $30. Now, in 2009, though, that price increased to $12 with the Clones and Assassin Droids battle packs. That's $18 today. The difference in price is not as much as you remember it. And that remains fairly consistent, that the price would stay between, adjusted for inflation, would stay between $17 and $19 between 2010 and 2020. The 501st Battle Pack with 6 minifigures was $30, which is $36 today, adjusted for inflation. And it has more significant builds. It's not a true battle pack. People call it a battle pack, that's fine. But it costs more because you got more. In 2022, the cost went to $20, $22 today. Now, one of the things to consider here is basically every set is getting a 20% discount within a few weeks to a couple of months of release. It really basically is a wash as far as price if you're not insisting on day one buy. What else is driving the prices of LEGO sets higher? Well, the number of licensed themes. And everybody keeps asking for them. The LEGO Group has stated before that you don't directly pay more for an IP. And even if that's the case, if they are paying more licensing fees for having more licensed properties, then even if they are spreading that evenly across all of their sets, You're paying more per set than you were before because there are more licensed themes now. Now that we've looked at that a little bit, what guides the price distribution of different sets inside different themes? And why do some themes get more expensive sets and some don't? LEGO's prime market is kids. 6 to 12 years old is kind of that sweet spot. That extends to 4 to 14, and even 2 to 16 is kind of how the bullseye works for their target market. But 6 to 12, that's the sweet spot. And thus, most of their lines are geared towards that. Whether that's Duplo or Peppa Pig or Juniors, Sonic, Gabby's Dollhouse, Minecraft, Star Wars, superheroes, City, Friends, Harry Potter, Speed Champions, all of these things, while adult fans might like them, the vast majority of the sets are geared towards their prime market, 6 to 12 years old. And when you look at it, these lines all have the vast majority of their sets in the sub $100 range. Now, the secondary market, because LEGO understands who actually has the money and it's not the little kids that most of the sets are being bought for, is the parents or grandparents or godparents or whoever else is buying sets for these kids. And they also understand that these people have money to spend on themselves. So they make most of the sets for their prime audience, for kids, 6 to 12, and then they make a subset of products for the people with the money. And, some popular content creators and others in the community are like, well, LEGO's just dumb because they don't make things that I like. They're always catering to, the 80s and 90s. They just barely started doing, UCS prequel sets. Yeah, there's a reason for that. LEGO understands economics. From 15 to 20 or even 25 years old, you don't have a lot of scratch. Your disposable income is minimal. And most parents are not out there buying $200 kids' toys for their teens. And let's be honest, most of us in our late teens and early 20s weren't as interested in LEGO. There's a reason there's a dark age. And LEGO understands that. You're busy, you have different interests, you may or may not come back to it later. That's fine, there's nothing wrong with that, but LEGO understands that there's a drop-off there. With that in mind, it's no coincidence that the Friends line recently celebrated their 10th year, and then this year, I believe it's their 13th year, dropped their first $200 set. If 25-ish, mid-20s to late 20s and into 30s and 40s is where you're really having your prime buying power, how old are those kids at the top of the 6 to 12 market range when Friends started now? 25. Similarly with Ninjago, right around their 10th year, a little bit earlier in some cases, you started getting the massive Ninjago City sets, which again puts you right when the original 12-year-olds to 14-year-olds who were into Ninjago back in the day, now in their mid-20s when these big sets started coming out. Speaking of larger Ninjago sets, I don't really collect a lot of Ninjago. I wish I could get their villains in battle packs because that would be amazing because their villains are always really cool looking. But I do have the Destiny's Bounty up here, and I do have the pseudo modulars because they're all pretty dang cool. Lots of parts, interesting building techniques, tons of minifigures, bright colors, a lot of change up from the typical modular buildings that you get. And not only that, my wife loves them. So anytime my wife says she wants a Lego set, we're gonna get that Lego set if it fits it all inside the budget. Again, returning to the Star Wars UCS stuff, the Venator that primarily appears in the Clone Wars cartoons, the target audience for that show is now reaching their mid to late 20s. They're not making stuff for 18 to 22-year-olds that don't have the money to spend on it. Now, you might have the money to spend on it and you're in that age band, but let's be honest, most of your peers don't. So they're targeting kids where the vast majority of their business is, and they're targeting people in their mid to late 20s and older who now have disposable income. It just makes sense. But when we objectively look at the set prices, the lower end sets, the less expensive sets under $100, they're remaining pretty constant as far as their prices go. Are they higher than they were before? Yeah, inflation. And the complexity of builds, and the quality of minifigures, and the number of exclusive prints, and the number of exclusive minifigures, etc., 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 are all higher than they used to be. All of those things cost more money. If you're not reusing a minifigure 10 times in 10 different sets, it's going to cost you more. By the way, that's why a theme like Dreams can have more exclusive recolors and cloth capes and things like that, because you're using that more times in more different sets, and so it drives the price down. Over here on this side, I've got several things from the 80s and 90s that are very popular, and I'll go through a couple of those a little more close up. A couple of the items from the 80s and 90s, Back to the Future, of course, great movie franchise, and one that still resonates today, but one also that definitely the people who were in the prime audience for it back in the day have the money to buy it. James Bond. One of the more popular movie franchises in history. This franchise has spanned decades, and it's iconic. So no wonder that a theme that appeals to such a broad audience, an IP that appeals to such a broad audience, would get attention. Likewise, Fast and the Furious. It hit big in the 90s and continued on into the 2000s, and really is the land before time of action movie genre. And then Scooby-Doo holds a lot of nostalgia for a lot of people, young or old really. There's been several different iterations of Scooby-Doo. This again checks when it resonates for multiple age groups, but especially the ones with the money, you're gonna get it. A couple of other items that became more popular throughout the 80s and 90s and kind of became mainstream in the 2000s. Yes, Star Wars. It's primarily an 80s and 90s market until recently, because that's who had the money. Dungeons and Dragons became much more popular and normalized over the last several years. People point to Lord of the Rings as a newer property. No, actually, the Lord of the Rings has been around for closing on a century now, and was fairly popular, at least among stereotypical LEGO type demographics, in the 90s and early 2000s. And that's why the theme performed so well when it came out as a LEGO line, because it had the backing of people with money. One more small showcase up here. I know I showed them in the mech videos, but what do you notice there? Transformers and Voltron. Also big in the 80s and 90s. Why is that important? Because the kids of the 80s and 90s are now the people with the money who are buying most of the sets for kids and the prime market for adult LEGO builders.
What conclusion do you draw? Does LEGO make too many big sets and not enough small ones? To me, that answer is no. They've struck a pretty good balance. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.